Okay, so we're going to do a slightly different video today. We're going to do a 45-minute code. And what I want to get accomplished in this 45-minute code is have our collaboration application be able to post a message to the database. And I want to see that message show up back in this list of messages. So we're going to do that as simply as possible to start with. We've got our database set up here, which I'm going to truncate so we don't have any messy data in there. And then we'll just make sure that it's truncated like that. I've got my view here in my PHP application, and I've got a form which has the action to posts. We're defining the method as post, and then we want to get this text area submitting back to the server. We want to do some filtering, and we want to do some verification on the data that's been submitted. And we then lastly want to display it in our app in a series of posts that are ordered in reverse chronological order. So the first thing that we want to do is get this form submitting. So I am going to start the clock, and hopefully that appears on the video. Yep, there it is. So we've got 45 minutes. Let's get through as much of this as we possibly can. So the first thing that I want to do is get a submit button rendering on this form. I've already started with the button here, but I think what we need is an input, and it needs to be of type submit. And it's been a while since I've done HTML like this. Type submit, value submit. Let's say value post, because that's what will be rendered on the actual face of the button. So yep, there's our button there. Like I said, we could fiddle around with styling and stuff, but we've got 45 minutes to ship a working piece of software. That's the hope. So we're not going to worry about that. So this should submit the form. Hello, this is my post. At this point, it submits and we get a route not found. Now, at this current stage, I have this ugly queue here, which I will certainly be getting rid of in the future, but for now, we're just going to have to live with it. What we'll also do is, what am I doing? Q equals. What we'll do in the future, what we'll also do is we'll make a route helper here that will build these for us in the future. But for now, because all we're interested in is getting this ready, we'll run with scissors for now. So I put in hello post, and now I actually am getting the correct route as I expect to see it, but it's complaining that we've got route not found. And that's because in our index file, we haven't actually defined the route. So here we can define a new route. So this is our routing layer, and we'll say posts, posts lowercase, and then I'm gonna posts create. So this is the view. This is the view that it's going to point to, and here is my views folder. So probably easier to check it from here. So here is my views folder. I've got about home. Let's create a new folder. Let's call it posts. Probably do this from Vim, but it doesn't really matter. Yep. So posts, and then here we want to create .php. So what this will have is, if we look at the original post view, index, home index it is at the moment. If we look at this, we actually have this context, and we have this context available to every view. So the context is kind of like our service layer, which we'll explain more in future episodes. But for now, just understand that it's got all of the declarations of our behavior in it. So let's just have a look and see what we've got for the post service at the moment. So here it is. So we've got the all function. So this is what will display all of the posts once they've been created. So we know that's working. And then here we've got the insert, which uses PDO to execute the query and then throws a posts service persistence exception if there's any errors. So in here, what we want to do, what we want to do here is call this method. We want to call save, and I can't actually remember the exact PHP post data. I think it's just an array called post. Let's not go here, let's go to the horse's mouth. And yeah, so post name right there. So we've got post name. Let's go back to our app. So here, let's just break onto a different line and make things a little bit easier to follow. So here we've got post, hi, name, but it's not name actually, it'll be the values that we've pre-populated into the form. So that'll be in here. So it goes off the names that you set here. So this is name body. So this should be post name body. Now, this method accepts. This method also accepts an email, I believe. Let's just have a posts service. Yeah, so we've got post body, user email. So at this point, I haven't actually built my authentication system. So I'm going to hard code the email address just to see this working. And we're going to set the value to someone at somewhere.com. And then we're going to close this here. So what we should have is the email address getting submitted in the same way that the body of the post is. So post, email, let's put names on these. So input name, email. So body and email, yep, okay. So we've got now body and email. Now at this point, there's probably, you could probably say that we should be handling errors here. So one way would just be to wrap this in a try catch. And then you would catch the error and react appropriately. I'm not too worried about doing that right now because I'm just happy for the error to bubble up. Error handling can be something that we add later. So at this point, all I really want to do here is redirect back to the index page that we started with. So to do that, redirect in PHP. Fortunately, PHP, how to code a PHP redirect. So yeah, I don't know the specifics. Okay, so we just set the header directly. Seems fairly reasonable. PHP seems to have, you don't seem to have abstractions to redirect directly. So we'll do that here. So I believe what we'll want to do is q equals slash. So that's how we redirect back to slash in our app right now for the moment. And I think the other thing that we want to do to be semantically correct in terms of HTTP is to set the PHP error code. Sorry, not the PHP error code. PHP set HTTP status code. So whenever you create something on a server in HTTP, you should return a 201, which indicates to the client that something has been created. It's generally good practice with your resources, and PHP should have a way of doing this. The manual for PHP is at times sparse, but other times it's pretty good. It's generally my go-to resource as I've been sort of learning PHP. So we want to go response code provided, etc., var dump. Does this set it though? Get or set. So I'm guessing I can just call this method. Let's give it a whirl. So in this case we want to set 201. So this should be all we need to do to get this written into the database. We don't actually, given this as a view, we don't actually have to respond with any content. Because we're immediately redirecting the user back with header location. So what will happen is the browser will hit this endpoint, the post service will get called. We haven't got any error handling yet, but when we do, we would do that there, and then at that point we set a header, a location header, which says to the browser, whatever the location is after location colon, take the user back to that location, and then set the response code to be 201, which represents a resource being created. Now, because I haven't actually output anything in PHP, I don't believe I should close my PHP tag, but someone tell me in the comments if that's wrong, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to do that in this situation. So let's go back and see if that's doing something. And we've got an error. So let's read it. Uncaught type error. Post service save must be of type string null given. Okay, so it looks like it's not picking up post body for some reason. And I've got post body set as the name. Let's just inspect element there. So name body, so I would expect that to work. Let's try it one more time. Argument 2 must be of type string null given. So now that seems to be complaining about the email address. Value someone at somewhere. Type hidden value, but we haven't given this a name. So let's do that. In fact, we have given it a name, we just haven't saved the file. So let's reload that again. Input name, email, type hidden. So that looks better. Let's go hello. Okay, so we're now getting a PDO exception. So PDO is the data abstraction that runs MySQL queries. So this is good. How are we doing for time? 32 minutes, not too bad. So it's complaining at us and saying, hey, you have an integrity constraint violation, cannot add a child row, foreign key constraint fails, collab posts, so that's the table we're writing to. And it's complaining that there's no user email. So why is it doing that? Well, the reason it's doing that is if we go down into MySQL Workbench and we look at the foreign keys of this table, do I get to see the table inspector? Foreign keys. Yeah, here we go. So you see a foreign key, user, column, user, email, reference user, reference column, email, etc., etc. So basically what that's saying is in your users table, unless you have this email address here, you won't be able to save the user. You need to have a user to link to properly. So if we do a select all on our users table, you can see that we've got a lot of emails, but none of them is the exact email that we need. Now that's a good thing, because you want your database to test things like this, because we don't want posts that are orphaned or have an invalid user or don't belong to a user properly. And we also don't want to code that behavior ourselves. We want to let the database handle it for us. And this is one of those examples where it has. So we get this kind of we get what's called referential integrity. If we leverage that in our database, we get all of this validation for free. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to grab the first email here, and then I'm just going to put it here. So eventually, when we code our authentication system in a future episode, what we'll do is we'll grab the currently logged in email address of the user and use it in place of this value here. But because we haven't written our authentication system yet, we just have to make up a user in order to satisfy the database constraint. Okay, so there's our value and there's our email address, so that should be valid now. So if I go back here, I say hello and I say post, and we still get an error. And it's complaining seemingly about the same thing. Let me just do a refresh and verify that that user is populated correctly. 140758. 140758, someone at somewhere.com, one of my favorite test email addresses. I would expect that to work unless... okay, that looks like it's done something, but it doesn't look like the redirects work. Let's see, let's go back to our index manually, and baboom, there we go. So we've got our post, it's in our database, and if I go down to MySQL Workbench, let's do a select rows limit 1000, and here is my post, and here's my user email, all referenced and looking nice. Okay, I like this. Let's go and let me try and, there we go. I want to figure out why I want to figure out why this isn't taking us back to the original page, but we're getting text in there. Let's try with lorem ipsum. If you ever see lorem ipsum, it's some Latin that's popular with software developers and people who develop fonts and things like that. It's just some nice dummy text, and this site generates it for you. So let's grab a couple of paragraphs, something decent to test with, and then paste it in here. Yep, there it is. So I'm going to post that, and I'm going to head back, and we've got the big post body. It's not actually respecting our formatting. In a future episode, we'll certainly convert this so it will at very least respect page breaks and put formatted lists on. Those kind of things are important when you're trying to build a collaboration tool like we are, albeit a sample collaboration tool. So we've got our text here, that's good. But I really want to solve that problem where it's not coming back to the main page. In fact, it's just sitting here. So to solve that problem, I'm going to look into the network tab. I'm going to trash everything, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to post again. And there's our post, method posts powered by PHP. So this is the request that's gone off to our PHP application. Excuse me. And these are the response headers that the app has sent back. Now, interestingly, location is set to what I expect it to be set to. Host looks correct. We're getting the correct status code 201, but the browser doesn't seem to be doing the redirection as I expect it to. So let's just try and put the full I think it's 8,000. Let's try and put the full URL in and see if it likes that. Localized 8,000 / yeah, that looks right to me. Let's try that. Back. If we refresh this page here, we would have had the post repeated a whole set of times. That's fine. One more. But again, we're not getting that redirect. So again, I come into here, the location looks set to me. I think it's because we're returning the wrong status code. I think we need to return a found status code, which isn't actually what I wanted to do initially. It was my impression that if you just set the location, maybe you didn't need to set found. But it looks like that's not the case. Redirect, so this is a redirect. URL given by the location, well, we've already got that set. Now, interestingly, in HTTP, which is a huge, sprawling, massive, multi-tentacled beast, there's about 1 million ways of doing everything. So I recommend just spending a little bit more time than you would think necessary to understand, to make sure that you're sending back the correct status code. So we're looking at 3xx. So there's a few here that we can will all do the same thing, but they all have different semantic purpose. 301 moved permanently. Resource requested has been definitively moved to the URL given by the location headers. I wouldn't say that's the case. Resource has been temporarily moved to the URL, perhaps. See other. Indicates the redirects don't link to the newly upload resources but to another page. As a result of a okay, there's always a get. Alright, so 303C other to me describes better than moved permanently and found what we're actually doing here. Not modified isn't applicable because we're writing to the database. Reuse to perform the redirected request, nope. Permanent redirect, nope. So out of all of these, 303C other seems to be the most appropriate. So let's try sending back a 303 and see what happens. 303. I'm going to go back to my main page. Here is my continually growing list of posts. I'm going to go post, and beautiful. So that's worked. And if I go to, don't know, posts, there we go, status 303. So that's redirecting nicely. And from a user's perspective, let's say, hello, this is another message that is not massive. MASSIV. Post. And back here. Now, there's a couple of problems here, and potentially a couple of bugs, and we've got about 21 minutes left to solve them. So let's pause the timer for now and address those in the next section of this video. Okay, so we're back, and I've cheated. I've done some research that I needed to quickly do. So a little bit more than 45 minutes, but not too much more, I promise you. So let's start our timer again. It was at 21 minutes last time. So I mentioned there's a couple of problems with our current solution. I'm going to show you one really big problem right now. So here's our message, and I'm a malicious user, and I'm going to post something like this. baddomain.com /nasty.js. Okay, so I put that script in there, I post, the page is reloaded, everything seems to have worked. I can't see anything. But if I go into the HTML of my page, and I go into main, and I go into posts, and I go to the last post, here is the script tag here. So this is a problem. This is a really big problem, because essentially what we're allowing users to do is an attack called script jacking or script injection. So we don't ever want to allow users to render tags directly on our site, because if users can load JavaScript onto our site that we don't know about, they can do all sorts of nasty things. Like they can track our users, they can potentially get passwords and email addresses and a whole raft of attacks. So this is quite a common attack. This and SQL injection are probably the two most common types of attacks, and it's fairly easy to mitigate against. And the way you do that is with filters. So PHP has an extensive set of what it calls filters that allow you to filter against these kind of attacks. And I'll show you how that works. So we're going to filter against our script injection attack by using this filter sanitize string, which strips tags, which is exactly what we want it to do. I believe you can escape tags, possibly. I want to eventually in this system support rich text, but for now, let's just filter them out so we're not insecure. So we're going to run this filter, and I've actually gone over and found on W3 Fools this being used. So like all good developers, we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it directly into our source code. So I am now in the service section of my application, and post body filtered post body, and so we filter, we sanitize string, and then this flag I'm not too concerned with at the moment. And then here where we actually execute the query, we put the filtered post body. Now the really nice thing about using PDO is that it gives you protection against most forms of SQL injection attack for free. So just by using prepare and execute, we actually are already protected against SQL injection, which is not something I realized straight away, but is a nice little side effect of PDO. Okay, so filtered post body, user email. So let's now see if this does what we want. So let's try our attack. What we'll do is we'll grab this, we'll go copy in HTML, and then we'll paste it in. Nope, that hasn't worked. Copy out of HTML, paste. There we go. Okay, so this is our nasty script at baddomain.com/nastyjs. Let's post it, and let's go down, and let's go back to our source code, and we're going to go to posts, and we're going to go to the last post, and you can see here this is actually empty, which is good because we've now mitigated against that attack. It's still in this old post, which was actually made before we added this security in. So if we were to add this security, say after the fact, we would have to go back to our database and do some sort of sanitization in there. But we've essentially blocked a very rudimentary attack, but an attack that's important to block nonetheless. That's not all PHP filters do, though. They've got you covered for a whole lot of other things, which I find really interesting. The other filter that I want to add is the validate email filter, because we are actually receiving an email address back at this point, albeit hard-coded. And then I'm just going to go down here and again copy and paste some code. This time I'm going to handle the exception. This time I need to handle a different case. We've got some branching logic. So if I go insert here, what we want to actually do, filter valid does not allow. So I believe if we don't have a valid email address, and this is actually user email here, user email, what we want to do is we want to throw a new exception. We'll call it a validation exception, VALID 8 EXCEPTION. Throw a new validation exception. So at this point, we should throw the exception, and then this save method will never run because we don't have a valid user email address. If we do, this if falls through, and then we go on to persisting in the database. Now, I probably, given that I've actually already got this type of exception, I'm probably just going to throw that because I already have this exception type defined, and it is a persistence issue, so let's throw that. You might want to have something slightly more sophisticated than just throwing an exception out in this situation, but for now I think this is perfectly valid. We will need to do some error handling in the future where this method will actually need to report back what's gone wrong, but given that we're trying to deliver something working in 45 minutes, that will do for now. We'll come back later and solve that. So we should let's just make sure everything works. So this is a test with the new filter. Post. And we go down, and that's made it. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's go to our home index view, which is here, and remember when we hard-coded the email address, let's remove the @ so we now have an invalid email address, and this should not work. If I post that, that hasn't been triggered. That's interesting. Is it because I didn't? I think it might actually be because I didn't refresh this page. Let's try this. Really should not work. Should not work. Okay, beautiful. Uncaught error. Post service persistence. Okay, so, so we've got an error, but it's not actually the error that we want. It's a class not found exception because of my many refactorings to get to this episode. I would say that post service, this is in the wrong namespace, and it is. So let's just fix that up quickly, and I'll reload. This is asking me, do you want to send the same? Do you want to send the same? Do you want to send the same data up that you did previous request, which is exactly what we do want to do. So I'm going to hit resend, and then I'm going to get an argument count error complaining at me that there are too few arguments because we're not passing in a message. So let's do that now. Actually, interestingly, the other exception down here is not passing a message either. So let's correct that issue now. Error, invalid. We don't need that. Invalid INVALID, invalid email, and then let's, for good measure, append the user email. Now you probably could argue with me. That it's not wise to do this because this might end up in an error log somewhere, and then you've got user email addresses and error logs, etc. That's a reasonable argument, but I'm going to do it anyway and run with scissors for the moment. Other error. We actually don't know what that is. So again, refresh. Same question. Do you want to resend? Yes, I do. We've got, and beautiful. So we now have our uncaught persistence exception, invalid email. Interestingly, PHP, if I go to the network, PHP still sends a 200 back. Not quite sure if we necessarily want that, but we're certainly not going to be able to, we're certainly never going to get an invalid email in there. So let's restore the correct behavior, views, home index, and I'm going to add our @. Okay, cool. I'm going to add our @ symbol, and I'm going to save, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to, so here we go. Just so you can see, there is my previous testing, and there's us going off and trying to get to bad domain nasty.js. So yeah, and I'm going to go, hello, this is another test. It's different. DIFFERINT to the others. Post. Great. And there's our test. Okay, great. So we've got a little under 8 minutes to go, and I've got all the functionality in that I wanted to get. I'm going to pause the video and come back and pause the timer, and we're going to fix up a little bit of the formatting and make this a little bit easier for users to digest. So I'll be back. Alright, so at this point, I've got just about everything delivered that I want. I'm just going to do a couple of formatting things, and we're going to present user details out to the user, to the template. And if we get time, we might write a little helper method or a helper function that will format our date for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to my post service. So here's my post service, and this is the fetch that I'm using now. At the moment, it's only selecting body. Excuse me. But we should return some more data. We should return created at, and we should return user email, which is actually the foreign key. So what is it? Body created at. and user email, like that. And one of the really cool things about PDO is it actually allows you to map directly to an entity class, which I've defined elsewhere. So if I go to my, actually, let me split the view. If I go to my post entity class, you can see here it's pretty simple. But what we can actually do is we can add created at, and we can add user email, and then those values will be automatically populated in the class that, say, rather in the object that gets returned. So if we go back to our view, which is here, we should be able to output them here. So I'm going to use, why don't I just copy this? I'm going to use the PHP short tag, which is just the question mark equals, and I'm going to say created at, and then I'm also going to say user email. And then I guess we'll just have another div here, if I can type, and this will be class like post details, like that. And then we can have, we'll have class post body, like this, and here we'll have, let's do a span, and we'll do the same thing here. Like that, and then the class on the span will be post user details, and then here will be post created at. Like that. created created at, like that. And so if we go back to our post entity, created at user email, okay, all of the spelling's correct there, there's no typos. Let's see what happens when we reload, and that is exactly what I wanted. So there's the username, that's our randomly generated email address, and then we've got our date time here. PHP has a couple of handy functions to format datetime. I also think that's actually, if we go down here, yeah, this is coming through as UTC. So in the 4 minutes we've got, let's see if we can convert UTC to time zone. Although, the thing is though, this will be a MySQL timestamp. We might not actually get here. Oh no, new date time. Is it the format that I'm getting? I'm going to assume that format's compatible. Okay, so I have to set the time zone. Right. Let's see if we can do that. Now, I'm about to break a bit of a rule here. And the reason I'm about to break a bit of a rule here is because I've only got 3 minutes left. So we will definitely clean this up later. But essentially, you don't, because we are in a file, a PHP file that has side effects, you don't want to ever declare functions inline. You don't really want to declare anything in this file. And that includes, for our MATTER, and that includes functions, variables are okay, but functions and classes should absolutely be not declared here. What we're going to do in a future episode is write a helper that will put our write a helper which we'll be able to load in. For now though, time raw db time, running out of time myself, and then go raw db time, Australia Melbourne, that's my time zone, and then we'll leave the formatting as it is, but instead of echoing we'll return here. Okay, so let's see if we can squeeze this out. Not even sure if I spelled formatter correctly. Let's go back to our... And that is... What time is it? 18:03. That is actually looking pretty good. So that is formatted correctly, exactly how I want. And it's respecting the current times. And now... Here, we'd probably want to grab the user's time zone, and also this is bad practice. We don't want this function here. We're going to extract it out into a helpers layer, but we got there in the end. We got our posts showing. We've protected ourselves against a few different types of attacks. We've added basic validation, and we've also formatted times correctly for our time zone. And speaking of time, we're out of it. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video has been helpful. As usual, please leave your comments. They drive this series, and I will hopefully see you very soon.